Hey guys, welcome back to another video with Rob Dennis. This might also be a video for the beta read specialist. I'm probably going to put it up on both of my channels. And I've got going, one of which is woodworking, one is low voltage controls. So today's project, or I should say this weekend's project, hopefully it'll only take me today, is going to be running this cable from my house to my shop. I'm trying to build a network cabinet up in my attic. So what I ordered from Amazon for about $110 is this true cable. It is a CAT6 direct burial. Direct burial means it's got a UV protection on the outer insulation, and then it's got interior dielectric grease and interior plastic wraps that protect the water. So, this is gonna be going through an underground conduit, so we wanna make sure that we get a little bit of water protection in there, a little bit of UV protection, just to help make it last as long as possible. There's the specs if you guys care about reading the specs, but this will be plenty enough to handle anything running from the house over. The standard rule of thumb is 300 feet is the length that you want to run CAT5, CAT6. You don't want to exceed that. The true number is 333 feet, but typically by the time you get it terminated and the device landed, you want to kind of save that 33 feet for however you route the wire or clean it up and make it nice and neat. But we're up here in the attic now. I have a lot of random stuff up here. A lot of it was left over from the previous homeowner, some of it's mine. It was originally downstairs in what was our guest room. This is a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath home. That's about 3,000 square feet. The closet in the guest room was originally an IT closet for the previous owner. So a lot of the plywood that you see sitting against the hot water heater made a box that he had cooled, and everything inside there had a lock on it. But I need that closet back because we're expecting another baby in September. So I got to turn that guest room into a bedroom. So to accommodate that, I took everything that was in that closet out, drug it up here, brought my label maker up and some other stuff because I'm gonna label the cables I've got running through the house. The white cables you see are coax cables. They've also got the power wire with them. So, a single coax and power wire for the cameras already installed in the house from the previous owner. All the blue wires are the CAT6s I ran. I just bought the wire offline, had it shipped to the house, and it's stuff I do for work, so I know how to do all that anyway. The black box you see in front of you with the wires plugged into it is the network switch. It's just a D-Link. I'm sorry, that one's a Dell, but I've got some smaller D-Links throughout the house that I've been using. I've also got this DVR that the coaxes can hook up to. It was being used by the previous homeowner. It was not plugged in or actually used when I moved in, so I'm not sure if it's still good or not, but I'm gonna go ahead and replace most of these cameras with IP cameras anyway, and then try to get as much of this wire out as I can. And basically just use it as a pull string to get the CAT6 where I need it. And just so you guys can see, I did swap out the hot water heater when I first moved in. Still got the old one up here. I need to take it and move it downstairs and dispose of it. The air conditioning unit, both inside and outside, have been replaced. But it's a pretty nice setup from the previous homeowner. He built stairs up. I've got lights that'll light it up all the way across. There's a walking path over there. That far side that's dark, that's the area above the garage. Lots of shelving, a lot of storage over there. That's where we keep all of our holiday decorations and a bunch of Morgan's teaching stuff. And old TV boxes. So I've got some scrap pieces of wood, like I said, up here that I ripped out of that other closet, and we're just gonna build a box to mount our switch in, and we're gonna take, if I can walk over there without falling, that hose right there is the one that ran down to the closet. We're gonna pull that off and run it to the new box. So we're gonna try to mount the new box right here where this plywood is. That way we're close to a couple of power connections. I need to really go through this house and see how he has everything wired up, the previous owner, so I can kind of separate some things out, relabel some breakers. But we're gonna build an IT closet up here and then run the ductwork into it, and then have a return that runs back to meet up with the house return. So some work there, but for now I've just had it running up here throughout the winter. I took most of the stuff out fall last year and just haven't had a chance to get up here and do anything about it. But before it gets too much warmer down here in the southeast in Alabama, I want to go ahead and knock it out. That rack you see made out of 2x4s, I originally built that to give some support to the hot water heater. But once I get everything put in, it's all kind of holding itself in place. So I'll probably take a strap from the top from the ceiling and run it down for the expansion tank. But for now, it's working fine. Okay, so we're outside now. I don't know if I've shown the front of my house in any of my videos. I've redone those doors. I'm gonna come back and put some polyurethane or monothane. It's like polyurethane, but made for exterior on there. I've still gotta pressure wash the house, but the pressure washer's not working. But if we walk outside to the outdoor breaker box, that is where the path runs up into the attic. All right, so you see that electrical plastic pipe that runs up the wall. That's already got an existing coax wire in it that runs up to the attic from the previous owner so that he can monitor his cameras that run in the outbuilding. So we got a little pulling L, or pulling T I should say, right there. We'll just pull that off with a Phillips head screwdriver, and then that'll give us access to the wires. We're gonna use the existing wires as a pull string. We're just gonna be very careful to make sure we don't mess with the cable wires that seem to be running into that same conduit and then up into the attic for the house. So just gonna be mindful of that, but I know there's existing coax in there for the cameras that run out to the shop. I've already verified it, and I've also verified that this conduit runs underground. You can kind of see it back there, the outbuilding above the privacy fence. So if we start walking that way, and I've already measured this out, it's less than 100 feet. Well, I mean, sorry, it's less than 200 feet to get between the attic and my outbuilding. What's making all the noise is my pool pump. We just got that repaired. Had to replace the Polaris motor and the primary pump motor. Jack came to see what was going on. Come on, buddy. Right, so I was kind of hoping there'd be some in-between spots where we could pull the wire, right? So we've got that box, and then we've got the septic tanks over there next to the pool, and there's another water box over here that we'll pass by. But none of those have the conduit running through it, so it's just a straight continuous run with no breaks in between. So that's one of the boxes I kind of need to clean up around it and replace the top. But if we come over here, you'll see that we've got two different conduits that come in. The larger conduit has the power for the sub panel that goes to the shop. My shop is powered, right? So this half of it is considered the pool house. Through that individual door is a bathroom. And then this half is my actual shop, but I'm turning this entire thing into a wood shop, right? So we're gonna bust open this small conduit and use the existing coax that runs here to pull our new CAT6 so that we can have TV, Wi-Fi, and everything else. And just so you guys can see, right, this is my pool house right now. There was a lot of OSB boarding on all the walls. I ripped it down because I want to put drywall up. My original thought for this place was to turn it into basically a mother-in-law suite, right? So we got a roll-up door so that we could pull a car in here if we needed to. Right now we got the Sea-Doo parked and some old antiques my mom gave me. We may be rebuilding some of those, but for now, I'll have some plans I can toss up on the screen. I'm going to be buying, well, I've already paid for it, a CNC machine for woodworking. It could be a plasma cutter also for aluminum and smaller metals, but I'm going to be using it predominantly for woodworking. So this is about a 14 by 17 area. So 14 from the window over to the pink insulation that you see, and then 17 from that rear window that leads outside to the roll-up door. So that's more than enough room to put in a, it's gonna be a 5 by 10 woodworking CNC machine. We've also got attic storage, and we can get past this rail out here. And it goes from one side of the building to the other. So the previous owner was all about storage, and it's great for me. We may walk up there and take a look in a second, but I went ahead and put together a bunch of shelves that I had from my old house. I used to just keep them in my garage. And then there's some cable hookups over in the corner. That shelf, they installed it with nails and screws, so I'm having to kind of cut it out piece by piece. I just haven't finished doing it yet. But I do plan to mount a TV in here. On that little piece of wall next to the door where the pink insulation is, closest to the Sea-Doo, I'm going to be putting the CNC computer in so that I can do all my controls and stuff out here. That's one of the reasons we need to run a network wire so we can stay up to date on plans, network updates, and all of that good stuff. And I can spend time out here without, you know, giving up all my free time. I can still watch YouTube or anything else I enjoy doing. And like I said, I was making this into a mother-in-law suite was my initial plan, but we'll probably just take that basin sink, put it back over in the left-hand corner, where you see the attachments sticking out of the wall. And that'll, you know, we'll use that for painting, stains, washing parts, all that good stuff. And if we walk back out and around, sorry about the mess. I keep moving stuff around, cleaning things up. This is my actual wood shop that on my primary channel I've been building out. So if you guys are watching this on the Bearded Specialist channel, you probably haven't seen this yet. But this is my wood shop that I've started. I'm still going to keep all my garden tools in here to keep them from getting messed up. But we have a compressor. I've got a bunch of pre-existing shelving. I've got all my wood storage that I'm trying to keep flat so it doesn't warp as bad over on the wall. I'm not sure if it needs to be standing or laid out flat. I see a lot of people keep it standing, so I need to do some research on that and find out. I've got a lot of cleanup I need to finish doing in here, but I've started. It doesn't look nearly as bad as it did if you guys are watching this on my main channel. I've also got a bunch of fittings, right? So I built this workbench. I got a video on that on my woodworking channel, but I needed more fittings for my dust collection that I'm putting together. I bought a Harbor Freight dust collector that is now wall mounted, but I've still got to finish figuring out how I'm going to attach that trash can to it. And the bag on top is just the filter. So over in the corner, this is where I'm trying to keep all my electrical stuff. This is where I'm going to be doing some Bearded Specialist content on wiring things up, doing low voltage controls. And this is where those two conduits that we showed you a second ago on the outside of the building run to, right? So one runs directly into the back of that sub panel, and the other one dumps out up above where you see those black wires coming through. So that black wire is the coax that runs out here, and that is going to be our pull string to get our CAT5, CAT6 wires where they need to be so that we can get our cameras and everything working out here. I do plan to do some live streaming occasionally, so I'm going to finish cleaning this back wall up. I'm just sort of playing around with stuff, trying to see how much space it's going to take up. All right, guys, so we just tossed the pouch on, grabbed it out of our truck. We've got the 11-to-1, the crimp tool, the strippers, and 2 tweakers, 1 Phillips, 1 common. That we'll be using. You'll see it several more times. So we just took our 11-to-1. If you guys aren't sure what this is, right? Milwaukee makes them, Klein makes them. If you want the Klein one like I've got, that's usually found on the electrical aisle, electrical accessories and tools. These run anywhere from $10 to $20 depending on how popular they are at the time. And I know that's a huge variation, but that's just what they do. That's why sometimes it's better just to buy the Milwaukee brand or the Husky brand, or whatever your preference is. The advantage of the 11-to-1 too, right? So it's going to have 2 different Phillips. It's going to have a PH1, PH2, and then it's going to have 2 common sizes. It's also going to have the hexagons for doing, act as a nut driver. And then it's got some star tips in there, or Torx tips. So very handy tool to have, especially when you're doing electrical work and low voltage work. So these boxes, sometimes they're Phillips, sometimes they're just common or flathead. Kind of bright out here, so it's sort of hard to tell. See if I can't get a better focus. We've got three black wires that run into here, 3 white wires, and then 1 brown wire. We're gonna leave some of these wires in here, even though it's gonna make it harder to pull. I'll probably just leave 1 existing wire, like one of those thicker black ones. And then we'll use these white ones as our pull strings. That way we can kind of free up some more space in the conduit and easily pull in our new wire. So basically pulling out 4 wires, because this is that power wire, coax wire together. So we're pulling out 4 wires and replacing it with 1. That way we can get our camera hookups going and we can get our network going. And we're gonna pull from this box back to that pulling tee. Okay, so we're back inside the shop. One thing you want to keep a lookout for, whether you're in the low voltage industry or something else and you're working in a warehouse or a building or just your shop like I am, right? We have a lot of rat poop, right? Rats are terrible for wires. They love to chew on low voltage cabling. They like the insulation. I don't know why. So with all this up here, 1, we need to clean it because I don't like all my stuff being dirty. 2, we're gonna probably have to go and get some traps or poison. Sorry if you guys don't like that, but the cost of having them chew up everything after repair it is pretty high. So we're gonna have to get them out of here. And that's probably what we'll do. We'll just kind of put some of that stuff up here on top of these shelves. That way when they come out at night, whenever I'm not in here, we can go ahead and solve that issue. Because I've also seen it in the other side of my shop. But back to the project at hand. All right, so like I said, those wires, they all pull up to here. What we're gonna do, because I've already tried to pull some of this out, it's really, really tight. So we're gonna cut one of these white wires here, go ahead and pull it down. We've also got that brown telephone wire that runs out here, so we can definitely cut this out. I'm thinking about using this telephone wire as my pull string. That way I can go ahead and pull out both of the white wires and free up as much real estate inside that pipe as possible, because right now I'm not getting any movement on the white wires, so it's just going to prove to be pretty difficult. I'm also going to trace out this larger black wire that runs to the telephone box on the side of the house and see exactly what he's doing with it, or was doing with it, because it runs up and back. So I don't know if it's an actual coax line or if it's another telephone line, because I'm thinking this brown wire was probably for his alarm system to tie it together. And then I'm thinking the thicker black wire is the actual telephone wire, because it runs into the telephone box while the brown wire runs up into the attic. So neither of them are being used. I don't need a phone in my house. I don't plan to use AT&T. Worst case scenario, if anybody comes after me and they want to have a dedicated phone line instead of just using the cable companies, that's on them. They can always re-pull it out to the shop. I don't see anybody in our day and time doing it. This house was built in '97, so that's why a lot of this stuff is here. And we're just gonna go ahead and start knocking it out. The other Siamese cable, that's what the power cable coax one is called, Siamese cable. You know, it's got two cables that are attached. We're gonna leave a lot of this just hanging in the ceiling for now, because we're gonna use it as a pull string later for the cameras. So let's go ahead and start cutting stuff and pulling it out. All right, so we got the wire pulled out from the ceiling in the shop. That way we've got a nice long piece of slack. We freed up some real estate inside the enclosure. We left the brown wires, even though I cut them on the inside. We're gonna use one as a pull string later to get up in there now that we've got more real estate to work with. The reason these have been so hard to pull, from what I can tell, there's a lot of sticky residue on there. So that duct tape that we saw up in the attic space wrapped around the wires, I think they may have duct taped these wires throughout before they pulled it into the conduit. So if you guys ever pull any wire, don't ever do that. Don't ever tape your wire and then pull it in, because if you ever come back to redo it later, add to, remove, replace, it's just gonna be a nightmare, right? Especially on a run that's this long that you have no way to get to without digging it up. So hopefully we'll be able to pull some of these white wires out. Hopefully the sticky residue is loose enough or the adhesive is loose enough where we can actually get some play on the wire and get it pulled out. So about to find out. All right, well that took about 2 hours, I'd say, altogether, maybe an hour and a half. We have the Siamese cable, the two coax cable lines, and one telephone line pulled out. We are ready to pull in our new CAT6 direct burial cable, and we left a piece of telephone line hanging out. Now that everything's pulled out, we should be able to get it in pretty easy. The other wires that are in there, we'll have to pull those up probably before we can get up into the attic with the new CAT6 direct burial, but that won't be too big of a deal because the distance is so much less, and I believe some of that wire is wrapped around the rafters up top, right? So, and that up there is a motion sensor if you guys are curious. Previous owner has a bunch of motion sensors around the exterior of the house, and there's cameras, 1 to 2 cameras on every corner near the front door, and some cameras around the shop on the corners. I don't know if I'll be able to zoom that far in. We'll try. Let's see. Max zoom. Okay, yeah, so you can see the cameras and lights out there. So I'm gonna try to reuse a bunch of these cameras. Maybe not reuse them, but at least reuse the wires and get them back up and working. That way if anybody breaks into the house, you know, we've got some footage, leg stand on, make insurance claims, all that good stuff. So one thing right now that would be handy to have for this wire spool is a set of stands that we can pull the wire on. They make them, you can buy them at Home Depot, Amazon, a lot of different places sell them. I don't have any, so I got a little short piece of conduit. I'm gonna get a longer piece, see what I can make up. Typically when I buy wire, I buy it in a box where it'll pull out of the box. The box is the stand, but the box I ordered off of Amazon as a standard consumer, because I wanted to make my video same way anybody else without a business license would be able to do. So we got the spool. We'll see what we can figure out to get it to pull while we are, you know, on the other side of the wire pulling on it to make our life easier. Okay, so this is my workaround. I just grabbed a 6-foot ladder, took a pretty long piece of 1/2-inch conduit, metallic EMT, and just set it down on the arms of the ladder. Made sure the face of the direction the wire is going to be pulling at against it, and I've got it running down. So typically what we call the taped end of the wire is the head. Right, so what we're gonna do before we walk to the other side, now that we've got it all taped up, is we're gonna make sure to slide it in. That way we're not getting caught. So there's nothing for it to catch on now, and it should come straight to us. Whenever you tape this stuff, make sure you overlap the tape as you pull it. Make sure the overlap is going against the direction that you're pulling it to, so these little lines of tape aren't catching on any lips that might be between you and there. It doesn't sound like it makes a huge difference, but there's a lot of connection points or a lot of couplings between you and there. A lot of times those can catch, and just that little bit of pressure when pulling something by yourself makes you think you're stuck, and then you just keep walking back and forth trying to figure out what's going on. Now the other thing too is don't skimp on your electrical wire. You can buy some really cheap electrical wire, but I always buy nice quality electrical wire. That way it'll stretch with the wire as I pull and have enough strength to make it all the way. All right, so we just walked over at the back side of the shop again, just to show you how easy this is pulling now that we've got all the junk out of the way. This is the last wire left in the underground conduit, so now I'm able to pull it with one hand. Extremely easy, especially once we get the motion going. So I'll bring you guys back when we get done. All right, so we got our new CAT5 cable, or I'm sorry, CAT6 burial cable pulled all the way to the shop. I just went and curled it up and put it on top of the hose holder. Still taped to the original telephone line. Now keep in mind on this telephone line, to keep from having to pull it all back into the building, we're gonna cut it short up here and then use this as a pull string into the building. We're gonna have to go ahead and get this big coax line out of the way to give us more space, because having pulled on this doesn't go all the way in and up like I would have done. If I had done this back before the walls were put in, I would have brought it in and then put a 90 in there and brought it up above the wall into the attic space. But instead, if we pull out on it, they kind of took a shortcut. So I'm gonna have to reseal this, make sure it's good and sealed up so we're not getting water in the building. And then get this wire pulled in and up the wall, which is gonna be a little bit of a pain, but we were able to pull some of these wires out and down. So we'll get the last couple wires out of the way and probably use the same thinner telephone wire as our pull string to get our network cable up into the attic. All right, so another rule of pulling wire, a long wire is a happy wire. So if we look at the front of the house, we know that the network switch is going to be above this room in the attic, because that's the closet that it was sitting in originally. So we're just moving everything up. So we wanted to make sure the wire was gonna be long enough so that we can neatly get it in there, arrange it for the switch. So we just walked the length of the house. Probably could have stopped even with the window and that would have been enough. But just to make sure we got enough to get it done without having to redo anything or take any shortcuts or make any splices, we just wrapped it around the corner, because you have to account for the distance that goes up the wall. So it's a 10-foot ceiling, and then up into the top of the attic, we're probably looking at not quite 20 feet. And then we got to go across, which would give us the space to the room, and then we've got to look at going into the cabinet and neatly making our connections and terminations. So with the wire being that long, we're good to go. Like I said, this spool of wire for direct burial off of Amazon cost $109 plus taxes. So probably about 112, 115 bucks. So not too crazy. And once we get it cut and pulled on this last side, we'll be ready to take it up into the attic. And as you guys saw a second ago, we're already ready to take it inside the workshop. All right, so now we're back up in the attic. Always remember, if you don't have flooring down or any kind of sheathing to walk on, stay on the rafters, but you really don't want to walk on anything that you don't have to, especially in an older house, because the screws will start to poke through in the ceiling. But we don't really have much of a choice. We got to find where these wires come in at. So we know some of those white wires, and we know we're looking over in that corner. We see we have some cable curled up there. We also know that we have a cable line that was newly pulled coming from that direction. So if we look down the ground, we see we have a black coax for our cable. Two of them, one pre-existing and one new one. And we see we have those two Siamese cables right along the back. So more than likely, the path that we're trying to find and get to is going to be back behind that duct. So it's gonna be a bit of a pain. I see where the previous owner has put some 2x4s down for us to walk on. So we're just gonna be real careful, try not to bust through the ceiling. Some of these they look nailed, they are not. So just always be aware of what you're stepping on. Okay guys, we ended up having to resort to getting the still fish tape out. We pulled out two of the wires are stuck in there that we couldn't get out. Basically one Siamese, one telephone cable will not pull out. Again, this guy, whoever did it, originally taped everything together, so I'm assuming the duct tape is just bound up on something in there. It seems like in that second bend right there where the coupling is, something in there is stuck. So we were able to get the steel fish tape through without too much of a problem. So hopefully this wire will come up with it, and then we'll be set. In the future, I was thinking about it. I wish I would have pulled 2 wires just to have a backbone for the cameras. That's kind of separate from the network. So we'll see how the network speed's going. The switch that I've got in the attic is just a 100 meg. So it can't do a full gig on every port, but you know, maybe we can upgrade that, and maybe this has got enough backbone to handle 2-3 cameras out in the shop. But we'll see how the live streaming and all is going. If we need to upgrade, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, and just, you know, run a few more direct lines out. And then what you're gonna see us do real quick, right? Like I said earlier, you wanna make sure you get this head in there. What I did is I stripped the cable back, and then I wrapped the copper, because we got 4 pairs in here, so I took 2 pairs through one direction, 2 pairs through the other direction. I pulled them down and then taped them, so the ends of them are where my fingers are. So that way when we're pulling this, it's pulling on the copper, shouldn't break even if we have to put a little bit of force on it, and we should be good to go. As you can see, I'm able to push it pretty easy, so I'm just gonna push this head all the way up in there so we're not getting, so steel fish tape isn't getting caught. You can see I kind of cut my hands up a little bit getting all this stuff done. But yep. All right, so we got the head shoved up in the pipe. It's gonna be tough getting through that 45, the 245-degree bends. But once we get past those, it's a straight shot up into the attic. And I left enough slack on the steel fish tape in the top where we don't have to crawl up into the eaves. All right, so we're back up in the attic. There's the steel fish tape. I've got it running over there. Like I said, I lifted enough slack where I wouldn't have to go back into the eaves, which it's hard to crawl into. But being the smart guy I am, I left my flashlight over there, so I'm gonna go over there and get the flashlight anyway. So we'll go ahead and see if we can't get this fish tape to pull the wire all the way up, and then go grab the flashlight once we're done. All right, so we got the outside of the house buttoned back up. The wire is pulled in nice and neat. We are good to go. Still gotta go finish the shop, but like I said, we got a floodlight on the back side of that, so we can finish that at night since we're running out of daylight. But let's go up to the attic real quick, make sure we're good to go, and we'll start working on terminations. All right, so the black cable you see curled up there on the ground, disorganized, that is the new CAT6 wire that we pulled back to the shop. Plenty of slack to get to the switch where we have it temporarily located on top of those power supplies. Like I said, we're gonna take some of these pieces of plywood that are left over and build us a box. I've got a little wall-mounted rack that we're just gonna mount to the back of a piece of plywood and then build a box around it. Make sure to leave enough space to organize our switches in it. That way we can rack mount a DVR. DVR is a digital video recorder. That way I can hook my cameras up to it. And I'm gonna try to keep my cameras off the backbone of the primary network and just run them on their separate network. And that's what I was saying earlier. I kind of wish I would have pulled a second network cable, but we'll cross that road later. As long as I get some cameras in the house, I can have them facing back towards the shop, but I'm trying to do some live streaming from the shop as well. So, you know, that needs to be on the main network anyway. We'll see what happens. All right, so we're back in the shop, up near the rafters, and we are on our final nuance, trying to get the wire up. I taped it to one of the browns. I tried pulling the brown. I couldn't get it to pull down. I couldn't get it to pull out. Couldn't get it to pull up. So what we're about to do is we're going to take this board off because it ends at the top of the shelf. And it's just, I don't know, 4 to 6 drywall screws holding it up, I hope. So hopefully it's not glued or anything behind it. It is tucked in behind those boards, which is going to be a pain in the butt. But we'll pop it loose somehow. That way we can get our hands on a little bit more wire and see hopefully what it's catching on behind the wall. I also wanted to point out that I did mark my top right TR and my bottom right, so I can make sure I put this board back up in the exact same orientation I'm taking it down in, so I'm not putting more holes in it or having struggles to align it. So we got the wall board off, and I've decided I'm going to leave that wall board off instead of putting it back up once we get this wire pulled in, because I'm going to need to pull some new wire down into the sub panel. So might as well leave that access open, because with that closeness of proximity to the sub panel, once we pull the cover off of it, we'll be able to get a new wire in there pretty easily. I got another video I'll be doing pretty soon for my specialist channel and for my woodworking channel. It's a big project, so I don't want to get too deep into it here, but pretty big purchase and pretty excited about it. It's gonna take a few months for it to get here, but definitely got to get all the wiring and everything prepped for it. So now that we got these wires, we can go ahead and pull it out of this board. That takes away one spot of resistance. And we'll see if we can't get, probably gonna take 2 hands, so I'll pull you guys back up once I get the wire in. All right, I just wanted some video evidence, guys, of what the problem has been this entire time, because this is what's probably stuck inside the conduit underground that I'll never get out. That is a piece of duct tape. See if we can't zoom in. That is duct tape where they taped all these wires together before they pulled it in. Don't ever do that. Don't ever tape the wires together when you pull them in, because this is what happens. You come back a few years later, a decade later, to try to make some changes and you can't. But we'll just pull on it really hard and we'll make it work. Okay, so we got the cable pulled in, coiled up neatly. I went ahead and left a little bit of slack down because I'm going to go ahead and plug my router in today, do the terminations and make sure the wire is good from A to B. That way we have a good solid network connection out here, good Wi-Fi out here in the shop. And then I'm going to figure out if I want to do conduit or what to go past all the high volt cabling that goes into the sub panel. Typically you don't want a bunch of data lines and low voltage wires coming across 120 volts. It will induce some voltage and kind of mess with the signal. But most devices and cables are made well enough nowadays, it's not going to really affect it too much, as long as you're not, getting on anything that's actual high voltage. So like 120 is really not going to do too much to mess with the data in today's devices. But you still want to try to avoid it just to make sure you don't have any issues. That way if you have to troubleshoot something down the road, it works out. And if we're trying to follow code, if this was a commercial site, we would definitely stay away from any high voltage wiring. Never use the same conduit, never use the same pipes, which we haven't done that here. I wouldn't do that at home, wouldn't do that on residential jobs, and it's against code to do it for commercial jobs. All right guys, we have the tip made on both sides. Got some good link lights going on, so about to head back out to the shop, plug the laptop in and see how we're doing. All right guys, got the laptop pulled out, and I got an old Linksys router that I used to use all the time. Pulled out, it's probably 5-6 years old, but it still works pretty well. We tipped the cable, plugged it not to the Ethernet port, because this is a router downstream of the other primary router, right? So the Ethernet port is for your ISP connection. So I just put it into port 1, doesn't really matter what port you put it into. You gotta do a little bit of configuration, but I had all that done already. So once you get that done, we got the laptop connected Wi-Fi connection to that router. We could plug it in, probably will plug it in eventually, but for now, we're just trying to verify our connection speeds. The best way to verify your connection speed is speedtest.net. You pull the website, this is what it looks like, and we just hit go. We'll see what our ping is, then we'll see what our download and upload speeds are. See how it compares to inside. Because it's a Wi-Fi connection, it's a little bit slower than my interior computer, but that's still really good for Wi-Fi. And this is out in the shop, so it's nice having a shop connection. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we are going to be using it for streaming, so we need to have good download and good upload speeds. So having a 62 download, I bet if I plug it in, we'll probably hit over 100. I pay for a full gig, but like most things, we don't get a full gig. We just get something that's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's 200 download. Really good upload speed, so that's going to be good for streaming, good for making videos and updating videos.